I traced the worn velvet armrest, breathing in decades of forgotten popcorn and dreams. Max had rented the entire Orpheum Theater for our anniversary, romantic and slightly unhinged. Different kind of screening, he'd promised with that half-smile that made me fall for him 8 years ago. The old projector hummed above us, casting shadows across faded burgundy walls. On screen, a black-and-white film flickered, something European, all meaningful glances and cigarette smoke. I wasn't really watching. Instead, I studied Max's profile in the blue-white glow, wondering when we'd stopped surprising each other. He shifted beside me, checking his watch. Third time in 10 minutes. Expecting someone? Just want everything to be perfect. His fingers drummed against his knee, a nervous habit I'd learned to read like weather patterns. The theater felt enormous around us, empty red seats stretching into darkness. I pulled my cardigan tighter. "You're fidgeting," I said. He turned to me, eyes bright, with something I couldn't name. "Julia, do you trust me?" The question hung between us like smoke. Of course I trusted him. We'd built our marriage on trust through his late nights at the law firm, through my mother's illness, through all the small betrayals couples learn to forgive. "Yes," I said, though something in his tone made the word feel heavier. He leaned over and kissed my temple, lips lingering. "I'll be back in a minute. Don't stop the film." Before I could ask why, Max was moving down the aisle. The exit door closed with a soft click, leaving me alone with the ghosts of 1,000 other screenings. The side door opened with a whisper. I glanced over, expecting Max's familiar silhouette. Instead, 7 men filed into the theater like shadows given form. They moved with quiet confidence, hands tucked into jacket pockets, faces half hidden in the flickering light. My breath caught. These weren't lost moviegoers. They belonged here somehow, part of whatever Max had orchestrated. The first man was tall with silver threading his dark hair. Behind him, a younger one with a slight limp. They arranged themselves with purpose, 3 in the row behind me, 2 on my left, 2 across the aisle. I should have been afraid. Instead, I found myself studying each face in the blue glow, noting how they avoided looking directly at me while making their presence unmistakably known. The one with silver hair leaned forward. "Max said you love plots with a twist," he whispered. His voice carried an accent I couldn't place. European, refined, but with rough edges. I didn't reply. My mouth had gone dry, heart hammering against my ribs. The movie continued its black and white dance, but the real drama was unfolding in the red velvet seats. The man on my left shifted closer. Not touching, but close enough that I felt the heat radiating from his body. He smelled of leather and rain, and something masculine that made my stomach flutter. "We're here for you," another voice said from behind me. "Only if you want us to be." The words sent electricity down my spine. I gripped the armrest tighter. This was insane. This was Max's surprise? 7 strangers who spoke like they knew exactly why they were here? But even as my rational mind screamed warnings, another part of me, buried under years of routine and respectability, whispered something else entirely. The youngest one, maybe 30 with dark eyes, smiled at me from across the aisle, not predatory or demanding, patient. Like he had all the time in the world. On screen, the actress was walking toward a door, her hand hovering over the handle. The man beside me moved his hand to the armrest between us. Not touching mine, but close enough that I felt the possibility like electricity. "We can leave," he said quietly. "Just say the word." But I didn't say the word. Instead, I let my fingers relax against the velvet, let the tension in my shoulders ease. The gesture felt like stepping off a cliff. He understood. They all did. The careful choreography began. A hand brushing my shoulder, fingers trailing along my wrist, someone's breath warm against my neck. Nothing demanding. Everything offered like a question I could answer or decline. The silver-haired man produced a hotel room card, setting it on the empty seat beside me without a word. The plastic caught the projector's light, gleaming like a promise. I stared at it, heart racing. This was the line Max had drawn. Not just fantasy, but something real and irreversible. The card represented a choice that would change everything. The movie played on, but I'd lost the plot entirely. My world had narrowed to this circle of warmth and possibility, to hands that knew exactly where to touch and when to pull back, to whispers that promised things my marriage had forgotten how to offer. "You're beautiful," someone murmured against my ear. The words shouldn't have mattered. I'd heard them before. But here, in this darkened theater with 7 strangers who owed me nothing, they felt like truth instead of obligation. I closed my eyes and let myself fall. The details blurred together, mouths and hands, and the soft sounds of fabric shifting. They were careful with me, reverent almost, like I was something precious they'd been entrusted to protect. When it was over, they left as quietly as they'd come. No words, no lingering touches, no awkward aftermath. Just 7 shadows dissolving back into darkness, leaving only the faint scent of cologne and the hotel card still gleaming on the empty seat. I straightened my clothes with shaking hands. The actress on screen was walking through that door now, disappearing into whatever waited on the other side. The exit clicked open. Max's footsteps echoed down the aisle. Max slid back into his seat like nothing had changed, but everything had changed. And I could feel it in the way my skin still hummed with unfamiliar touches. He didn't look at me immediately. Just stared at the screen where credits were starting to roll. The actress's name appeared first, followed by a director I'd never heard of. "Good movie?" he asked, voice carefully neutral. I opened my mouth, then closed it. What was I supposed to say? That I hadn't watched a single minute after he left? That 7 strangers had just redefined everything I thought I knew about desire and boundaries? Instead, I reached for the hotel card still gleaming beside me. The plastic felt warm between my fingers, substantial in a way that made everything else feel dreamlike. Max's eyes followed the motion. He saw the card, saw my fingers wrapped around it, and something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, recognition. "Julia," he said, voice different now. Softer, but somehow more intense. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. Set it on my lap with the same careful precision the silver-haired man had used with the card. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. Max's handwriting. That was just the trailer. The real film is yet to come. The words hit me like cold water. This hadn't been spontaneous. Max had orchestrated everything. The theater, the timing, the 7 men who knew exactly what to do. "You planned this," I whispered. He nodded, finally meeting my eyes. "Every detail." "Why?" Max reached over and covered my hand with his. "Because I know you. Because I've watched you disappear a little more each year, and I couldn't stand to lose any more of you to safety and routine." The projector clicked off above us, plunging the theater into deeper darkness. Emergency lights cast everything in dim red. I stared at the note in my lap, trying to process the magnitude of what he'd done. The planning, the trust, the absolute faith that I wouldn't run screaming. "The real film?" I asked. Max smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached his eyes. "That depends entirely on you." We sat in the red-lit darkness, the weight of Max's revelation settling between us like dust after an explosion. "How long have you been planning this?" "Months. Since your birthday, when you said you felt like you were disappearing." I remembered that conversation. Too much wine, too much honesty about the way our marriage had settled into comfortable patterns that felt more like sleepwalking than living. "And those men?" "Actors," he said quickly. "Professional, discreet. Nothing random or dangerous." The word hit me like a slap. "Actors?" Max's face went pale. "Julia, I didn't mean..." But I was already standing. "You hired actors to seduce me?" To give you what you needed, he said, following me toward the aisle. What we both needed. I spun around to face him. What I needed was my husband, not some elaborate performance. The words echoed in the empty theater. Max stopped short, like I'd physically struck him. I thought... He ran a hand through his hair. You said you felt invisible, like you'd forgotten how to want things. So you decided to remind me by turning our anniversary into theater? The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Here we were, standing in an actual theater, having our most honest conversation in years while surrounded by props and pretense. It wasn't supposed to feel like theater, Max said quietly. It was supposed to feel like freedom. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the Max I knew, careful, methodical, risk-averse, with the one who'd orchestrated something this elaborate and dangerous. Did it work? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. The question hung between us like a challenge. Did it work? Had those careful touches and whispered words awakened something in me that had been sleeping? I thought about the hotel card still clutched in my hand, about the way my body had responded to strangers' touches, about the part of me that had come alive under the projector's flickering light. Yes, I said, the word torn from somewhere deep inside me. And that's what terrifies me. The admission hung between us like a confession. Max's shoulders sagged with relief, but his eyes held something deeper, recognition that we'd crossed into unmapped territory. What happens now? I asked, sinking back into my seat. The theater felt different in the emergency lighting. Less magical, more real. I could see the worn patches on the carpet, the water stains on the ceiling. Max sat beside me but didn't reach for my hand. That depends on what you want. I don't know what I want anymore. The honesty felt raw. An hour ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was. Now, tell me about them, I said. The actors. Max hesitated. Does it matter? Everything matters now. He sighed. Theater company downtown. I've used them for client events before. They specialize in immersive experiences. When I explained what I wanted... What you wanted, I repeated. Not what we wanted, what you decided I needed. You're right. The words came out flat, defeated. I made assumptions. I thought I was giving you a gift, but maybe I was just solving a problem the way I solve everything else, with planning and control. I studied his profile in the dim light. This was the Max I'd fallen in love with, the one who admitted his mistakes instead of defending them. Did you watch? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His head snapped toward me. No, God, no. Julia, I would never... But you knew what would happen. I hoped. His voice dropped to barely audible. I hoped you'd find something you'd lost. I hoped we both would. The hotel card felt heavy in my palm. Such a small thing to carry so much weight, plastic and possibility, transgression and trust. The note said this was just the trailer, I said. Max nodded slowly. If you want there to be more. If this is something you want to explore together, as partners instead of... He gestured at the empty theater. Whatever this was. And if I don't? Then we go home and pretend this never happened. We go back to safe and comfortable and slowly disappearing. The choice stretched between us like a chasm. On one side lay everything familiar. On the other side waited something unknown and potentially dangerous. I looked up at the dark projector one last time, remembering its earlier hum. I need to understand something, I said, turning to face Max fully. Was any of this real? The way I felt? The way they touched me? Was it all just performance? Max was quiet for a long moment. The setup was performance. The intention was real. What you felt... He met my eyes. That was the most real thing I've seen from you in years. The truth hit me like a physical blow. He was right. I had felt more alive in those 20 minutes with 7 strangers than I had in months of comfortable marriage. I hate that you're right, I whispered. I hate that I had to hire actors to give my wife what she needed, he replied. But I don't regret doing it. We sat in the silence that followed, both processing the wreckage and possibility of what we'd uncovered. What would the real film look like? I asked eventually. Max shifted, hope creeping into his voice. Whatever we decide together. No scripts, no actors, just us figuring out what we actually want instead of what we think we should want. That's terrifying. Good terrifying or bad terrifying? I considered the question seriously. The thought of exploring this side of myself, of our relationship, with Max as a true partner rather than puppet master, it was frightening in the way that all real growth was frightening. Good terrifying, I said finally. I think. Max's smile was soft but genuine. We don't have to decide everything tonight. We can take it slow, figure it out as we go. With rules, I said quickly, and boundaries, and complete honesty about what we want and don't want. Agreed. I looked down at the hotel card still in my hand, then at Max's note crumpled in the other. 2 pieces of paper and plastic that had changed everything, that had blown up our careful life and left us sitting in the rubble. I love you, I said, because it needed to be said, because it was still true despite everything that had changed. I love you too, Max replied, even if I showed it in the most fucked up way possible. I laughed, surprising myself. It was pretty fucked up, but effective. But effective, I agreed. The emergency lights flickered once, reminding us that the real world was waiting outside. Soon, we'd have to leave this cocoon and figure out how to live with what we'd discovered. But not yet. For now, we could sit in the darkness and plan our next scene. Max drove us home in comfortable silence, both lost in thought. The city blurred past, neon signs and late-night diners, the ordinary world going about its business, while ours had been quietly revolutionized. Our house looked exactly the same from the outside. Same white picket fence, same carefully maintained garden. But I felt like a different person walking up that familiar path. Inside, Max poured wine while I stood in our living room, seeing it with new eyes. The matching furniture we'd chosen together, the wedding photos on the mantel, the careful coordination that spoke of a life built on compromise. Do you think we're terrible people? I asked, accepting the wine. Max considered the question seriously. I think we're people who got lost somewhere along the way and found a pretty dramatic method of getting unlost. I sank into the couch, tucking my legs under me. My mother would have a heart attack if she knew. Your mother doesn't need to know. No one needs to know, I said, then paused. Except us. We need to know what this means, what we want it to mean. Max sat beside me, careful to leave space between us. Even now he was being cautious, letting me set the pace. I have a confession, he said. My stomach clenched. Another one? I've been thinking about this, about us exploring things, for longer than just since your birthday. I've been thinking about it for years. The admission hung between us. I studied his face, looking for signs of the stranger who'd orchestrated tonight's events. Why didn't you say anything before? Because I was afraid, he said simply. Afraid you'd think I was perverted or unsatisfied or that I didn't love you enough just as you were. I set down my wine and reached for the hotel card, which I'd been carrying like a talisman. The plastic was warm from my palm, edges slightly bent. What do we do with this? I asked, holding it up. Max's eyes followed the card. Whatever feels right. Use it, don't use it. Keep it as a reminder that we're capable of surprising ourselves. The card represented possibility, a door we could walk through or leave forever closed, but more than that, it represented trust. I thought about the 7 strangers, about the way they'd touched me like I was precious, about the part of myself that had awakened under their careful attention. That woman, bold, sensual, unafraid of her own desires, she was part of me too. I want to keep exploring, I said finally, but differently, honestly. Max nodded. How? I smiled, feeling more certain than I had all evening. I guess we'll figure it out as we go. 3 days later, I stood in front of our bedroom mirror, getting ready for what Max had carefully termed an experiment in honesty. No elaborate setups this time, no hired actors. Just us and a conversation about what we actually wanted. I'd spent the intervening days thinking, processing, occasionally panicking about what we'd unleashed. But underneath the fear was something else. Excitement, anticipation, a sense that we were finally moving towards something instead of just maintaining what we already had. Max appeared in the mirror behind me. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do, he said for the third time. I know. I turned to face him. Do you know what you want to do? The question caught him off guard. We'd spent so much time talking about my needs, my awakening, that we'd barely touched on what this meant for him. I want to watch you discover what you like, he said slowly. I want to be part of that instead of orchestrating it from the outside. And what do you like? He was quiet for a moment, wrestling with 8 years of careful self-control. I like seeing you powerful, in charge of what happens to you. The admission hung between us, simple and profound. This wasn't about him controlling my experience. It was about him stepping back and letting me explore, letting me choose. Then that's where we start, I said. We'd made reservations at a wine bar downtown, neutral territory where we could talk without the weight of our bedroom pressing down on us. The conversation that followed was halting at first, full of false starts and embarrassed laughter. But gradually, we found our rhythm. I told him about the fantasy I'd harbored for years but never voiced, the one where I was the center of attention, desired and pursued, and completely in control. He told me about his fantasy of watching me embrace that power, of being the one person in the room who got to go home with me afterward. So, the theater, I said. That was you trying to give me that feeling. Badly, Max admitted. I should have talked to you first, should have made you a partner instead of a surprise recipient. But it worked, I said. It woke something up in me that I'd forgotten was there. The wine loosened our tongues, made the conversation flow easier. We talked about boundaries and safe words and the difference between fantasy and reality. We talked about trust and communication and the 1,000 small ways couples could explore without hiring actors or renting theaters. By the time we left the bar, we had the outline of a new understanding. Not rules exactly, but guidelines. Ways to explore that honored both our needs and our relationship. The hotel card was still tucked in my wallet, a reminder of possibility. But we didn't need it anymore. We had something better. Honesty, partnership, and the knowledge that we could surprise ourselves without destroying what we'd built together. 2 weeks after the theater, Max and I hosted our first dinner party in months. Nothing elaborate, just 4 couples we'd been friends with for years, gathered around our dining room table for wine and conversation. But something was different. I felt different. More present, more engaged, more myself than I'd been in years. When David made his usual joke about married couples losing their spark, I caught Max's eye across the table and smiled. We had secrets now, good ones. The kind that made us conspirators instead of just companions. After everyone left, we cleaned up together in comfortable silence. I found the note Max had written that night at the theater, tucked between the pages of a cookbook where I'd hidden it like a love letter. That was just the trailer, I read aloud. The real film is yet to come. Max looked up from loading the dishwasher. How do you think the real film is going so far? I considered the question seriously. We'd had several conversations since that night, each one peeling back another layer of assumption and expectation. We'd made some tentative plans, set some boundaries, agreed to take things slowly and honestly. The exploration was just beginning, but already I felt more connected to Max, and to myself, than I had in years. I think it's going to be a long film, I said. Lots of character development. Max laughed. That's the best kind. I folded the note carefully and tucked it back into the cookbook. We'd keep it there, a reminder of the night everything changed, the night we stopped pretending we were satisfied with safe and started reaching for something more complicated and real. "What's our next scene?" I asked. Max dried his hands, considering. "I was thinking we could start with something simple. Dinner out, just the two of us, but this time you get to decide everything. Where we go, what we do, how the evening unfolds." The suggestion was simple, but significant. Control, choice, agency. The things I'd discovered I craved that night in the theater now offered freely within the context of our relationship. "I'd like that," I said. "Good." He moved closer, stopping just within arm's reach, close enough to touch if I wanted to, far enough away that the choice was mine. "I love you, Julia. The you from before, and the you from now, and whoever you're becoming." I stepped forward and kissed him, tasting possibility on his lips. Outside, the city hummed with its usual late-night energy, couples walking home from dates, friends sharing secrets, strangers passing on sidewalks. But inside our kitchen, in the space between what was and what could be, Max and I were writing our own story. No scripts this time, no elaborate setups or hired actors. Just two people who decided that comfort wasn't enough, that they wanted to keep surprising each other for the rest of their lives. The real film was just beginning. 6 months later, I stood in the bathroom of a different hotel, checking my reflection before heading downstairs to the lobby. Max was waiting for me there, along with 2 other couples we'd met through a discreet online community, people who understood that marriage could be both stable and adventurous, that love and exploration weren't mutually exclusive. Tonight would be different from that first night at the theater. No scripts, no surprises, no elaborate orchestration. Just honest conversation about desires and boundaries, followed by whatever felt right for everyone involved. Or nothing at all, if that's what we decided. The old projector from the Orpheum had found its way into our bedroom. Max had bought it when the theater finally closed for renovations. Sometimes we turned it on just to hear that familiar hum, to remember the night we stopped pretending we were satisfied with ordinary.